I'll give you in a few minutes 3 examples for cooperation we are having in Austria, or especially in our region. To give you an overview, we have in Austria 22 universities, but I'm now speaking of the region of Styria, and maybe also in contrast to that, what we have heard before, and maybe in contrast to what you're having in Lithuania, I would say we are not that radical in Austria. We are also in the situation that budgets are still growing, which is of course a good thing for the universities, for the higher education institutions. Although we have pressure to become more efficient, that goes hand in hand with additional financing, especially from the Ministry of Finance, not so much from the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of Science. And of course, we have also problems in our rankings, in our visibility of the university. So in a way, we face the same challenges, of course. In terms of financing, not so much, and generally I would say we are not very radically in Austria concerning reforms, which might be a good thing. When you talk about these issues in Austria, I would say we have the right approach. In my personal view, I'm not sure. I would also say that maybe the development also depends on demography, as we have discussed also before. Might also go into the direction of mergers. The first example I would like to give you is a not so intense cooperation, but I think quite interesting. You see here the region of Styria. Austria is not a very big country, but still we have 9 federal estates. It's also because we don't have real strong reforms. We still have nine quite, in many senses, quite independent federal states. And in our region, we have 9 higher education institutions. The universities in Graz, our university, General University, the Medical University, which used to be part of our university until 12 years ago. So we went into another direction, not to merge, but to separate, became an independent institution. And the University of Technology, and then you have universities of applied sciences and colleges of education. And all these cooperate in the science space Styria on an equal basis, and I think that's a very decisive point. The rectors and sometimes the vice rectors come together at least 4 times a year, and we don't differentiate, or it's not a hierarchy. Our university is by far the biggest, with more than 30,000 students, with institutions with only small staff and a few much lower numbers of students, but still it's an equal approach, which is, I think, quite important. What have we done in 2011 when we started the cooperation, the science-based theory? We employed a consultant, which is quite unusual for our standards. So we're not in Austria in general, but for universities, and identified the fields we have in common in the 9 institutions. And I would say the best working cooperations are in the field of teaching, because teaching, of course, is something which everyone has in common, and quite successful is the cooperation and concerning in building up a kind of academy for teaching skills. This is also funded by the regional government. There's not a huge amount of money involved, but I would say we get per year about 100,000 euro to develop projects. And this very much leads to a common view of certain things, and it might lead also to deeper cooperations in certain areas. In other areas you see here, I wouldn't go now into details in the field of infrastructure, certainly, and I'll show you other examples for that. Administration is something which is addressed quite well, and altogether I would say it leads to at least more visibility internally in Austria. That's of course an issue we are facing, that the visibility outside cannot really be reached by this kind of cooperation. I mean, outside of Austria, but within we are quite a good example for cooperating, and this also helps us to gain further support from also the federal Austrian level. I mentioned that because of the international positioning, it's of course not very international when we do common communication on the local papers, but it helps internally quite a lot. We also have a platform I have not mentioned here. Together, these institutions, together with the leading industry or the leading corporations in the region, we also meet about 6 times a year, which is quite a good thing. Of course, the plans we are always having as creating joint infrastructure do work in certain areas where you have project money, which which comes from the government, where you have a certain framework. It's not so easy to join to bring together the interests of universities and the industry without having this financial support or pressure from outside. I would say I worked myself in the automotive industry, and of course we cooperated then with universities when it's helped us. When we saw a market for our own investment, we did it internally. So there's no real wish to help the university. It's all about gaining profit at the end of the day. I think you have to be quite rational about it. Yeah. I come now to two concrete projects which are examples for very strong cooperation, but not a merger. In Graz, we have 2 strong departments, faculties as we call it, for natural sciences at the General University and in the University of Technology. We have had, because in practice we have joined forces and have now one department for natural science, Navi Graz, which is focusing on teaching, research and organization in these here mentioned fields: bioscience, chemistry, earth, space and environmental science, mathematics and physics. And this is quite accepted as the best functioning inter-university cooperation. If you enroll at the University of Technology or at our university, it's all the same from the point of a student. You get, of course, common courses. Projects are addressed by both universities. So there's, from the point of view from the students, there's no big difference if you join one or the other university. There's an aligned strategic development in natural sciences. There are joint nominations of professors, joint procurement, so you can find elements we heard in the first speeches here also today. Joint study programs, which I would say are the core of the cooperation. The doctoral training is working together, and joint affirmative actions also for addressing certain issues, as for example to bring more female researchers and professors to the university. Some key figures: 36 institutes, more than 1,000 researchers involved, 5,500 students, 600 PhD students, and 21 study programs here in Navi Graz. Very important, of course, are the central labs, the common infrastructure, and this is an example for very successful cooperation, I would say. It's of course the investments for universities is a big issue, especially in the natural science field, as you know, and so for us it's more or less the only way have investments which are up to date when we join forces with others. And here you have listed the central labs, core facilities we have installed together. A word to the governance. It's of course, when I came from the industry to the university in my today's position, I thought, well, there's one natural, it was well communicated, one must say, there's one department for natural sciences. I was quite disappointed to hear, in fact, there are three. There's ours, there's the one of the University of Technology, and then there's the common one. So that's what I meant. We are not that radical. I would say in a couple of years, it could also become one department, and we could skip the existing ones. But that's very much about the acceptance of the faculty and at the universities, the wish to really come together in a bottom-up way is a big issue. And when just these days we will communicate a new physics center of physics in Graz, and this will be in one new building at our university, and all professors and infrastructure from the University of Technology will come to our campus. Which is, of course, a big thing, but also a big change for the people involved at the University of Technology. At the same time, there's a new center for geoscience, we call it, where our professors and infrastructure moves to the University of Technology. So these are steps towards a merger with keeping the identity of the universities, I would say. I'll give you quickly another example which is working very well, especially concerning visibility. It also has to do with our strengths at the universities, especially at our university, which are, for example, in molecular biomedicine, where we have also quite successful participations in rankings. And BiotechMed is a cooperation of 3 universities, the mentioned University of Technology, our university, the General University, and the University of the Medical University. In certain areas you have listed here on this page. As I said before, the Medical University used to be a department in our university, but what I hear from the professors is that cooperation never has been so close and good as it is today between the institutes. So the cooperation was not that deep when it was a department at our university. So maybe when you discuss issues of merger, you also have to keep that in mind. It's not only about the governance, it's also about the wish to cooperate also internally in university, especially in bigger ones. A few words to the governance. There's a steering committee, a director of BiotechMed, and a co-director. There are certain general meetings. I would say it's always about people, of course. If you have integrative people who are really behind the projects, it works well. Coming from different areas, I would say governance is an issue, of course. It could be easier. It's, of course, always a task to coordinate 3 universities in certain areas. But the cooperation, which was installed in 2013, only has been successful, we have to say. We were successful to build up joint research infrastructure, also because of the visibility BiotechMed has in Austria. Of course, we are quite successful in public tenders, or we get additional funding from the ministries because of this visibility and because of being a voluntary, deep cooperation, I would say. And quite important also are the aligned appointments for BiotechMed. Professors are working for all of these 3 universities in certain areas, which also works very well, but which is certainly also based on existing scientific cooperation that was there before, and again the wish of the people to join forces. And here just you have a few examples of things that make brings a kind of biotech med spirit to the Free University. I would like to stop here because time is running out. But as I said, I think these are good working examples for cooperation. My personal point of view, governance is an issue that could easier be tackled maybe when you merge institutions. On the other hand, you have here a strong will and wish behind of the involved people to work together, which leads to successful projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter, for sharing your experience. And probably we see another type of win-win situation. Yes, if the case of Ireland, we saw that like people decided to create something new institution, yeah? And you, as I understand, you are going through evolution, just trying to cooperate to see where is the synergies. So any kind of questions, probably the second situation is visible in many cases in our institutions, yes? And now we are just probably jumping to another when we are talking about mergers. Any comments, because it's really very important to us, the situations which we are living now in Lithuania, so, no? Okay.
Thank you, it's a very interesting presentation. Anyhow, these three institutions, you are still kind of a competitors, yes? For students and for funding. So could you outline some of your key challenges?
Yeah.
In that model, because actually it's very attractive, because you kind of create a new value added, not merging, but cooperating between those three institutions. But what are the key challenges and how you resolve that issue of like competing with each other for resources
Well, of course, it's important to know the background. The medical university, we're not really competing for the students, but we depend on each other, I would say. And in the University of Technology, the students going there, they have different goals concerning their studies and other professional ideas, or ideas for their professions. The medical university, people want to become doctors, and it's quite difficult to get a place at the medical university. You have entrance exams. You also have entrance exams in certain studies offered at our university, but not in all. So I would say many students who try to get into the medical university and don't pass, they come to our university. So in a way, similar interests from the students' point of view, but it's not a real competition about the students. It might be a competition about doctoral students, but the background, I think, the most important background is that all the involved researchers, professors know that on their own they are not visible enough. They have almost no chance to get European funding, so they need the cooperation, and they have had it for many years. I mentioned the infrastructure, but you can also argue in the same way for getting bigger European projects, for example. You need partners, and our advantage is that you have competent partners in the region, which is not always enough. Of course, you have international corporations as well, but on their own, the institutions in these certain fields are too small. So I would say that's the main challenge. But I mentioned governance, and maybe governance is not broad enough. There are, of course, challenges because it needs a lot of talking to the people to use. What's the English word for publication? Common publications. Not to put the medical university, but to put the biotech med and things like that. So practical things. You have to invest a lot in making it run in the things where people not obviously benefit. I would say that's the main challenge.
So thank you. Okay.
Short additional comment. Because of this very successful triangle cooperation, do you see any possibilities in the close future to merge these three universities and then to be more competitive with Vienna, for example, just, you know, nationally wide?
We have no problems to compete with Vienna. but of course I understand what you mean. I would say, I mentioned at the beginning that we have no obvious financial pressure, which is of course relative because it always depends on where you come from. We have additional financing now for the next 3 years agreement with the government. Austrian universities become in average 13% more money in the coming 3 years in the performance agreement, which is good. So there comes no pressure from that side, and of course reforms, mergers are easier when you have the financial pressure. I would think in most countries you had the situation that you had to join forces or were forced to, and it does not look like that there comes this kind of pressure from the Austrian government in the coming years. But in practice, I would say we could join, and I would personally think in 20 years there will be maybe something like the universities of Graz, where you have these 3 universities in a kind of close cooperation. I would not think that it necessarily needs that you have to merge the whole university. I'm not sure how that's interesting to hear, of course, what experiences you make in the coming years. You could, of course, do much more in the administrative field, that you could save money here and there. But on the other hand, concerning science, research, curricula, of course, is an issue where we could do more. I'm not sure how much we would benefit from joining the universities, except visibility and administrative issues, procurement, these kind of things, joint infrastructure. Yeah.